It's the last day of April, and I'm hoping that this rather cold spring will move on fairly shortly, because my windowsills, like a lot of gardeners, are absolutely bursting with plants. He's looking really healthy at the moment. I've got basil that I've potted on from a supermarket basil, and then at the back I've got some chilies and tomatoes and lots more on other windowsills. I've just been doing a little bit at a time as I've gone along. Classic, do a bit, rest a bit, do a bit, rest a bit. And looking out of this window, this has been an absolute joy lately, because in this tangle of honeysuckle we've got blackbirds nesting, and we can watch them all day, but particularly in the evening in dusk, with the parents going backwards and forwards, constantly feeding those little hungry mouths. It's wonderful. That's the sound of the blackbird alarm in the background, calling to its mate, going chip, chip, in the nest here in the honeysuckle. Usual roar of the grass mowers in the background. Here he comes. The very high-pitched squeaking of the fledglings. Looking from the outside now, my windowsills are green, inside and out. The roses are now coming into leaf, a beautiful deep red. And underneath, the thick growth of allium leaves, and the peonies, which it seems like only 10 minutes ago were just deep red spikes, are lush, and they've got these lovely big fat buds coming. This one is called Shirley Temple. It's going to have a big white pom-pom head. I'm sure these giant lilies have put on another foot's growth since yesterday. And then down beneath them, this wonderful tangle of jasmine stems. Got my little washing up bowl pond full of green goo at the moment, but I'm not going to touch it because I have no idea what is growing in there, what little animal life is beneath the surface. So I'm just watching to see what happens and topping it up every couple of days. This front bed is beginning to get past its glory of last month with all of the hyacinths and spring bulbs in it, but it still has snowflakes there. Lots and lots of pulmonaria. The bees. And the hellebores, which have lost their beautiful pink delicacy but now are green, and they'll stay like that for weeks and weeks. Still rather lovely. Primroses have been in bloom now since February, and nobody's told them that they're supposed to be in the flower beds, so they've been seeding well out into the lawn here. In the porch window there's lots of chilies peeping out, also waiting for the frost to pass. I'm hoping they won't get too much taller. The seedlings are inside too long, they get very tall and leggy. Tomatoes there behind the rose. This is the aubrietia underneath the roses. Into the bed, in the shadow of the hedge, very little will grow, so I decided to let the dead nettle go. As you can see, the bees really like this area. There's a feverfew plant growing in there as well. There's bright green fronds, and at the front, the pale green spikes are purple toad flax. The apple trees are just beginning to show the first pink of their blossom. and the grass underneath is really lush. I've let it grow, partly because I haven't had the time and energy to do it, partly to let the spring bulbs that were planted there get as much energy into them as possible before I cut the tops off. So you can see these spider growths there. Those are crocuses. The leaves are now going yellow at the end, which tells me that they've taken as much goodness down into the bulbs as they are going to be able to. So I'm going to be able to cut those. The long grass has also produced a lovely crop of daisies and dandelions, which are feeding the bees. And then further along, a little patch of primroses. I'm in the middle of strimming now. I'm taking a bit of a break, but I've strimmed around those to let them go. It's the blackbird shouting at me again. The cat must be somewhere near. In the long grass here, because I've let it grow, are buds of cuckoo flower. Might be able to insert a photo of the full open flower. Right at the back there's a splash of bright red, which is a tulip. And I've always been told that tulips don't last very long, but these have come up every year in the 15 years that we've lived in this house, just as beautiful. And I think initially they were probably planted in a border that the hedge then overgrew, and they were lost for several years till we cut it back a bit. That has been a border of daffodils. Also gone over now, but I've let this grow long, so we've got white dead nettle at the back. Also really good for the bees at this time of year. One of the things that makes a big difference in being able to manage a garden or not is to have the right tools. I've battled for years with strimmers that constantly break, and it's really hard work to keep replacing the spool. I also think they're quite heavy, and some of the ones I've had have been really short, which means I've bent over all the time. This one is a beauty. It's so lightweight that I can just stand there and swish it and it hardly feels like work at all. Very lightweight, and the spool doesn't break. It's a McAllister that I got from Screwfix. And just look at that blossom. That's so exciting. I haven't seen this much blossom on this Discovery apple tree for a long time. Behind it, lots of cow parsley coming, and some goosegrass, which I've always really tried to avoid in the garden because it just spreads everywhere. But in this corner, it's quite welcome, and I can pull handfuls of it for the chickens every now and again just to keep it under control. Also known as cleavers or sticky willy to some people. More primroses hiding in the grass. Another weed, supposedly. This is violet, popping up all over the place. Each seed has a tiny little package of oil, which encourages ants to take them down into the ground, into their nests, and that's how they spread. I've also got self-seeded alpine strawberries in here, in amongst the daffodils. This salad bed is high on my list of things to do soon, so I shall sit down with it or kneel down with it and have a real good go at it over the weekend. I think I've got lots of little lettuce plants ready to put in. So this is my before picture. You'll be able to see it after later on. Despite the weeds, we've got chard coming through, which we've been eating, and the sorrel is producing lots of leaf, so that's the mainstay in the salads at the moment. And above the salads, these tiny little red jostaberry flowers. Just look at the yellow of this geranium. And then at the foot of this little dead plant material, the lemon balm is just beginning to spring up. My flower border under the hedge is absolutely full of spring bulb leaves at the moment, so it's green but not particularly beautiful when you look from further back. And I'm leaving those leaves, like the crocuses, to take in as much goodness as they can, ready for next year. But deep down behind them is this beautiful little anemone blonda. And there are still hyacinths and dandelions. And muscari or grape hyacinths underneath the quince tree as well. The tree is come into leaf. That'll have some very beautiful little white flowers on before too long. And even more exciting than the blossom on the Discovery apple, this is the first year I've had blossom on this tree that I took as a graft in a class, and it's called Pink Pearl. So if I get apples, they're supposed to have deep red skins and very pink flesh. And these are my Slovenian tulips. These were bulbs given to me on a work trip to Slovenia with the Erasmus scheme, when we were going around projects that were using gardening, horticulture and outdoor activities for therapeutic reasons. It was a beautiful gift to bring home because they've grown every year since. Acer leaves. And the buds of Lily of the Valley just by the back door. Here we have the first shoots of the hostas coming through, which apparently in China are a delicacy. They cut them at this point and steam them, I think. Now here's a job that took me a couple of days to do, putting up these blue hoops of plumber pipe with the EnviroMesh to protect the African kale inside from the butterflies, which the cabbage whites will be, well, they're already around now, but May time they will really strip anything that's visible. So I've got lots of space to put in my new seedlings that are sitting in the greenhouse at the moment. To the side of them are some parsnips. I thought I'd pulled them all at Christmas and I left some. And these are along the side, so I've decided I'm going to leave them and let them go to flower, see if I can get some seed from them. I've never seen parsnip flowers before, so it's going to be interesting. Behind them you can see one of the globe artichoke plants and the rhubarb. These are the parsnip leaves, looking lovely and lush. Very careful with parsnips because they have a very toxic substance in the leaf that makes you photosensitive. So I discovered once when I pulled parsnip seedlings and ended up with very rich, itchy red hands and itchy numb patches on my lips where I touched my lips with it. Not hugely dangerous, just uncomfortable, and very, very toxic to the guinea pigs, who unfortunately were the recipients of these lovely juicy green leaves, and it was their last meal. Underneath the parsnips, saxifrage dancing in the breeze, and London Pride filling in a rather awkward gap where there's almost no soil and it's just rock. So I've turned it into a long, thin rockery. The borders one side of the veg bed. Down in the rhubarb patch, the blanched rhubarb is just beginning to make it out of the top of this forcer, which was a gift to me by my mother-in-law a few years back. Smudge is guarding the garlic plants there, listening to the birds. And I've got my bags of compost, peat-free of course, all ready to go. These flowers here are of the land cress, which is part of the brassica family. And it's also been really useful for us for salads over the winter, and it does taste very much like watercress. Now again, it's food for the insects, but once that goes over I'll chop it right down to ground level. I don't particularly want that seeding everywhere, it's already making a bid for freedom. I planted some Sweet Williams last year from seed and then put them in this little patch where there wasn't very much else growing, and they've decided they really liked it and bopped up into a whole bed. The place they came from originally, they've really struggled, and often that's the way it goes. If a plant's not happy, it's always worth trying it somewhere else. I think they probably needed more moisture than they were getting underneath the Leylandii hedge. Down among the alpine strawberry leaves, ladybird, looking for my aphids. I watched a sparrow the other day clinging to the top of a rose bush and pecking the aphids off from underneath the leaves. And the rose frond, even though it was so delicate, barely moved. Now this is my pride and joy at the moment. Anybody who's looked at the March video will know that this was a disaster over winter. I was just so tired that I was just putting things here on the floor and leaving them. And it got to be a real mess. So over the course of a couple of weeks I've tidied this all out. I've renewed the gravel and the watering system, tidied everything out, got rid of quite a lot of stuff. There's still some stuff to be done in here, but at least it's functioning. I have these self-watering tubs ready for my tomatoes, and as you can see, what it is 2 big black plastic trugs, one inside the other. At the bottom they're separated by a brick, and the top one has got lots of holes in the bottom, one of which is holding half a drink bottle. So what I can do is I can pour all the water down in that drink bottle really quickly. It fills up the reservoir, and I don't have to water this every day, and the tomatoes get a nice steady supply of water, which they like. If you just give them a little bit every day, they tend to dry out and they get blossom end rot. So I have 4 of those all ready to go now when my tomatoes can come out and the cold's finished. Now, this might look a bit strange, but I've got big plastic trays of grit here, and at each end I've got a terracotta container. This is an old wine cooler full of water, and because it's porous and it's sitting on capillary matting that's underneath the grit, the water is coming out in a constant stream underneath the plants. So again, I don't have to do lots and lots of watering. Some of the taller containers, like these root trainers, I am watering the tops sometimes because they're not in contact with the gravel, but it makes life so much easier. And then down at this end I've got another big terracotta pot full of water, and it's joined into the capillary matting in the black tray by a rigid capillary, and you can see how moist it keeps because you can't see the capillary matting at all. It's completely hidden by this moss. And then sitting on the top, so they've got extra space and so that the flies don't nest in the water too much, mosquitoes, I've got an old grill tray, more capillary matting here that goes down and into the terracotta pot, capillary matting underneath, and that's more space where I'm going to be able to keep my plants during the summer. And what I've got at the moment, on the left, spinach, I've got kale, early purple sprouting, sweet corn at the back, and tiny little, oh, what are they? They're not kohlrabi, celeriac, that's the word I was looking for. Not much going on the other side, but I do have a pot of dahlias. Dahlias also don't like the frost, so they're in here for now. And at the back there's some coriander seedlings. I have no idea how those got in there. Pea shoots and an auricula, which is facing the wrong way, growing towards the sun. This one's called Indian Love Call. Turn it around. Very pretty. And that's my compost sieve. I wrote about this in one of my blogs. It's a Christmas present, and I can put the compost that I make through that, and it gets rid of all of the bigger bits, makes it nice and soft. And I've used a mixture of that and topsoil and some old bought compost to make a really nice mix for these planters. And I was able to do that over the couple of weeks that I've been working on it, just by doing a little bit at a time, sitting on a chair, turning that handle. What is this cat doing? It's having a mad half hour. And outside the door you can see the stuff that was in the greenhouse is now on its way somewhere else, including half bags of sand and goodness knows what else. We managed to prune the buddleia, or Simon pruned the buddleia while I sat and watched him and gave instructions. That had a real battering from the frost, but I'm not worried about it because I think it would take a bomb to kill a buddleia, frankly. And then behind it, the red currant. These tiny little green cascades of blossom. Have you ever seen gooseberry flowers before? Oh, now you have. Little green bells with red lining. Lovely glossy leaves. I spent 10 minutes earlier in the spring getting rid of all the weeds in this bed and planting out some of the lettuces that I'd sown in the late autumn. So they're beginning to heart up nicely now. I've got some coriander in the middle. I've planted more seeds. That's coriander seedlings coming through. And I'm hoping there'll be spring onions and radishes as well. And another of the self-watering containers has a little drainage hole in the bottom so that it can't just fill up. I forgot to say that on the tomato ones. Just there, just above the level of the brick, so it never gets
deeper than that in water, otherwise everything would become waterlogged and dark.
Chickens are getting noisy. They think I'm going to feed them, and they're right. I'll give them some corn in a minute. They've been in this little pen all winter because of the avian flu outbreak, but that's actually been lifted now. So as soon as I'm able, we're going to move them back into the main pen, give them a bit more space. And they have been eating all of the ends of my brassicas from last year. You can just see the stalks there. They're stripping all the leaves off. Nothing's wasted. Turning all the weeds and the old leaves into eggs. The bottom of the garden, or what I think used to be within an old field hedge before these new houses were built, and they were let to go, and are now interestingly shaped lollipop ash trees. And this tree in particular with all the ivy, it's like a high-rise block for birds. I've been lying in the hammock with my new camera photographing them. You can see at the top there's a pigeon and a male blackbird who wakes us up in the morning sometimes with his singing. But there's I think at least one, possibly two blackbird nests in there, goldfinches, sparrows, the pigeons. Always activity along the line of trees here. Another pigeon further on. People are always very rude about pigeons and how they eat all the birdseed, but if you look up close at them, they are really, really beautiful birds. I thought I could hear baby blackbirds, but that very high-pitched peeping is from the male adult at the top there. They make an extraordinary range of sounds. I used to try and pull out all the dandelions, but I know better now. I know how important they are for the pollinating insects. And looking up close at them, they're just so beautiful. Otherwise known as scatter seed. Dandelion, teeth of the lion, or wet the bed for the diuretic properties. Now, if you weren't told that was a dandelion and saw it in a seed catalogue, why wouldn't you want to buy that? There's been a lot of activity around the insect house with mason bees in and out of these tubes, but no sign of them actually closing up the ends yet. I'm not sure what they do to prepare them. I suspect they're just spring cleaning at the moment, but it won't be long. Oh, there's one, I think. You can see the bee has already begun to close up the hole on the inside and lay an egg inside, leave it some food, and then they just leave it until it hatches. Mason bees are phenomenally important pollinators. I think they can pollinate something like 100 times as many plants as a honeybee will in the same time. So there's my garden in April. Lots and lots to do, but that's a joy. It would be dreadful if there was nothing to do at all. And I would love sharing it with Smudge. She likes to follow me around the garden.